We're finishing up a series we've been doing, walking through the book of 1st and 2nd Kings and reading about all the events that led to the civil war in Israel, the split in Israel, literally brought down the most powerful nation on the planet at that time, and hoping and praying that as we see the mistakes that they made, that we as a nation don't make the same mistakes. He said God allowed this to happen because Solomon refused to be obedient to God and broke the covenant he had with God. So God allowed this to happen in order to do what he said, to remove the kingdom from Solomon and give it to one of his servants. And people say, well, look what God did. It wasn't God doing anything. The only reason this happened was because Solomon didn't uphold his portion of the covenant. So God had no choice but to fulfill his portion of the covenant. And it all started initially with Solomon, and we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, the civil war initially within Solomon that each and every one of us probably has, every person on the planet has. Here's what God wants for us, but here's what we want for ourselves. Here's what God wanted for Solomon. I want you to be faithful. I don't want you to serve any other gods. I want it to be a relationship between you and me. But Solomon wanted to follow after his wives and their gods, and he violated the covenant. And then it was a civil war between the people who said, hey, you know what? You're now King Rehoboam. If you just don't be as harsh as your father, don't be as restrictive as your father, don't put as many burdens on us as your father. The people saying, here's what we want. And then Rehoboam, whether it be because of bad advice or not being a good leader, not having a little head, saying, I don't care what the people want, I'm going to do what I want. Then there was this civil war between the government and the people that caused them to split. But ultimately, it was just an issue of the people rebelling against God. God saying, here's what I want for this nation, and people saying, not so much. We want something totally different. While I was sick, I was literally laying on the couch doing nothing but watching TV. Well, I do that anyway, but I was watching TV, and Christy and I started watching this show. Some of you guys may have heard of it. It's called Beyond Scared Straight. Anyone heard of that? Okay, there was a show called Scared Straight. I think it was in the 80s and 90s, and this is Beyond Scared Straight. Basically the same thing, though, where they take at-risk youth. Doesn't matter if they're urban youth, rural youth, suburban youth, from the barns, the city, doesn't matter. They take them, guys and girls, and they bring them to prisons where prisoners who are in prison basically try to scare the daylights out of them with the truth. And as I'm watching the show, it was pretty, direct, because the prisoners were telling them, if you come here, you will get raped, you will get stabbed, you will get beat to death. And the only way that won't happen to you is if you become the object of someone who's strong enough to protect you. Every single, we watched a couple episodes, and they told all these kids that. And they even showed them, they said, you think that these guards will protect you. They will not. And the guards were right there. They didn't say anything. The guards will not protect you because these cameras, we will turn away. And when you're walking down here, we will push you out of the way, and we will beat you, we will rape you, or you will be killed. And there was one group that was walking down, and literally, as they passed, you couldn't even see it, as they passed what looked like a wall, it was actually a bathroom, two guys just reached out, grabbed one of the kids, and pulled him into the bathroom. And they surrounded him and said, give us your sneakers. And he gave them to them. And the cameras were right there. And they got in his face and they said, this will happen to you every single day if you end up here. And then they put him back in line. He was scared to death. And for some of these kids, at the end, they show you, here's what happened with this kid. By the time we finished production, a lot of them were on camera saying, hey, I don't want to end up there. I don't want that to be me. It worked. They scared me straight. I saw what happened to them. I don't want this to happen to me. And a lot of them, they went correcting. They got back in school. Their grades shot up. They started obeying their parents. They got the message because they saw this is what happened. And this is what literally the author of 1st and 2nd Kings is documenting for us. This is what's going to happen to every single nation that rejects God. And if you look throughout history at all the nations where there was a Christian presence, but then they rejected God, most of them don't exist anymore, and the ones that do are a pale comparison of what they used to be.